All right, let's talk about money and finance. Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. My name is João Campari. I work for WWF as the global leader for food and agriculture. We work in about 80 to 85 countries, helping the world think about transformations in the food system. And one of the transformations that we need to make for food systems to operate within planetary boundaries is to talk about finance, to talk about linking finance with climate justice. So if I may share just as a context before we go into the program, the full program, a slide that shows, let's see, it's there. So we have, we know that while 25 biggest food companies on the planet generated 1.8 trillion US dollars in revenue in 2023. These numbers are from 2023. Unsustainable food and agricultural systems are heavily subsidized, right? You all know that. And this means that 470 billion US dollars annually are spent on subsidies that are harmful to nature and are harmful to climate. At the same time, recent figures show that food and agricultural systems receive only 2.5% of public climate finance. And the situation can get even worse when we look at small-scale family farmers who produce as much as half of all the foods that we eat, half of the calories that circulate in our plates, and they receive only 0.36% of the finance they need for adaptation, right? So this event here is about climate finance, in particularly finance for adaptation and climate justice. And we're going to look how they can converge, because they must converge to accelerate the transformation of the food systems across production, consumption, and waste. So this is just to frame the initial thinking, to put everybody in the mood for the event and what we're going to be talking about here today. So to start off, I'd like to show you a 5-minute video that was produced by SNV and to kick us off. So welcome to all. Let's enjoy the event. Thanks.
Yaani mazao yakawa kuna msimu unakuwa na ndizi kabisa, alafu kuna msimu ndizi inapotea. Kipindi kunapokuwa na hiyo tabia ya nchi, uwezi unavyopungua sasa hizi unakuta zinapungua. Kwa hiyo unakuta kata ndizi kwa kile faida kwa kitu tunapata hapo awali ndizi ziwa.
The climate crisis is hitting smallholder farmers hardest. When droughts, floods, or pests strike, they have little protection and few safety nets. These farmers grow a third of the world's food and are critical to global food security. But farmers don't work alone. Behind every harvest are local agribusinesses, seed suppliers, cooperatives, food processors, and traders that connect farmers to the tools, markets, and services they need to survive. And yet, small-scale agricultural systems receive less than 1% of global climate finance. Weak infrastructure and fragile rural economies discourage the very investment farmers and agribusinesses need in order to adapt.
So when it comes to the concept of specifically, the general idea is that you're looking at either companies or projects or smaller farmers who are too big for a microfinance institution or for cooperatives that you have in different countries, but too small for a development financial institution, for banks and larger financial institutions in the country.
The other thing that looks to me is the gap such a role is like that what we should do about it. And it really is work out that.
As development paradigms shift, participated, building effective approaches to deliver finance on the front lines of the climate crisis is becoming critical.
Finance is, I think, really one of the solutions to address really the goals that we set ourselves to important. That it's not public, it's private, it's, all those national development banks, the governments, the local governments. I mean, it's really an endeavor that we have to address together.
Increasingly, impact-driven finance models are shown promise as one way to bridge this gap. Blended finance, for instance, combines public grants with private investment.
The role of development finance institutes like the development bank is quite crucial in sort of trying to allocate capital the sectors and regions most. The Dutch Fund for Economic Development in about 2019 is a partnership between NGOs, WWF, and SME together with investors like Dutch Development Bank and also trying and together trying to de-risk the projects and turn for a backdoor position so that investors like FNO actually invest in scale them further.
Meet Dan, Michael, and Elliot Thayer. They started a separate groups in Tanzania to help farmers get better prices for their crops. From just 5 employees, they have grown into a company of 500, building a network of more than 10,000 farmers along the way. Today, farmers in their network earn 3 times more than they did before. So, how did they get there?
Equity investment. If more wanted ESG, this is some activities for such as the technology, the platform that we have here supposed to enter new markets such as the data, DFCD, these kind of activities that the finance markets are that there is a demand.
Here's how it works. First, early stage grants help promising companies prove their model. Then, de-risking support creates a pipeline of viability to bigger investors. Finally, they can access commercial or development finance to scale up. East African Foods is just one success story, but the model is spreading. Across Africa, Asia, and Latin America, innovative financing is unlocking investment in small-scale agriculture. By bringing together the private sector, development banks, governments, and influential organizations, these partnerships can deliver what each actor working alone cannot.
Big round of applause to the SNV video. This is great because it shows such a great example of how blended finance can change livelihoods, can change communities, and so on and so forth. And we at WWF are very proud to collaborate with the SNV as the originating agency for this. for the Dutch Fund for Climate and Development. Next, I'd like to bring to stage Nicolas Lancesser. He is the Director for Climate and Environment of the Institut de la Finance Durable. Welcome, Nicolas. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm going to make a very short presentation before the panel. So thanks to the Food and Agriculture Pavilion to host this event. And it's a very good opportunity for IFD to present our work on agriculture that we did in 2025. This is a very important topic for us. So first, a quick presentation of IFD. So we are an association that represents the actors from the Paris Financial Centers. And we have the mission to accelerate the efforts of the Paris Financial Centers around ecological transitions. And so one of our main missions is around a committee that we have the secretariat with the French Treasury. And so we have this high-level committee chaired by the Minister of Finance and composed by CEOs of financial institutions and corporates. And in this context, we published several reports to identify the obstacles for financing the transition and make propositions to unlock this financing. And one of our focus, as I said, is on agriculture sector that we published a report in 2025. So this is a French example. This is to finance the transition in France, but we thought it was backs on what you will hear. So first, if you can, thank you very much. So okay, I will go on. So the first part of the report, I will be very quick on this one. This is for setting the scene. As you know, maybe, and as it is in many countries, the agricultural sector is very sensitive. Politically, it's very sensitive because of sovereignty, competitiveness issues. And plus, this is at the intersection of many issues, such as climate, climate, biodiversity, health, etc. So we need an holistic approach on this when you analyze this sector. So very quickly on the diagnosis, in France, we have several financial issues for the agricultural sectors. First, the profitability of the agriculture farms. This is very heterogeneous, and we have a high dependency in France on subsidies. For instance, 20% of farms would be in deficit without subsidies. So this is a very high number. And another important aspect is that farmers have a high debt ratio. So in France, it's around 63%. So the consequence of that is that there is a low capacity to invest in transition because agriculture farms have already invested in lands, in machines, etc. Before that. And another important aspect is that although farmers get a small fraction of the revenues, so in France it's 6 euros for 100 euros spent by consumer in France on the food, only 6% goes to French farms. So although this is a small fraction of the revenues, most of the efforts of the whole value chain of agri-food sector, so most of the efforts to transition are relies on the farmers' actions. So yes. Thank you. And my last slide is around the recommendation that we made after our work. So first, on an idea to promote the health of soils, it would be to open up the available data on that, but also to create some indicators to provide information on the health of soils, because when farmers are selling their land, it has to be an information for the one buying it to have concrete information on that aspect. Otherwise, it's impossible to put value on the health of soils. So this is a very important aspect. Other ones are maybe around, promote opportunities for sustainable products. For instance, consumer information, as I said, but here it's for the retail, public procurement to be sure that there is market for good agricultural products, sustainable products. And also on the transparency on the value chain costs, because there are a lot of issues on that aspect, because we don't know exactly what are the costs, for retailers, for industrials on the agri-food sector, and also farmers. So, for the negotiation on price, to be sure that everybody has the right information. And maybe another one is on the temporary land holding mechanism to support the farms at their establishments, to be sure that they don't have to invest too many money and let opportunity to invest in the transition. And last one, maybe important in France, but maybe it's not the case in every country. Instead of having tax exemption, on the fact to buying big machines for farmers, maybe withdraw this tax exemption and put them on the facility to increase savings for transition for the farms. So yes, that was a few elements on what is going on in France on the agriculture sector, but I let the floor now to the panel.
Thank you so much, Nicolas, to share your insights and also to show examples of how this can be done, the transition to nature positive, people positive, and climate resilient food systems can work. In fact, you mentioned something super interesting that we generally don't hear about is public procurement, right? Here in Brazil, the school system, public school system is mandated to acquire, to buy a very large amount of the school meal, what they serve as food in the school cafeterias, from smallholder farmers. So this is super important. In some countries, procurement can go up to 50% of the revenue spent on that. So it's really cool to have these ideas of public procurement, prioritizing resilient and nature positive food systems. Thanks for sharing your insights from IDF. All right, now it's time for the fun part too. Not that the previous weren't, but it's the panel time. So I'd like to invite to the stage Maya Rajakaran. I call it Maya. Maya is the managing director of the Americas for the Alliance of Biodiversity International and CIAT. Also, Elise, welcome. Also, Elise Billard, head of climate strategy, sustainability and impact from Crédit Agricole. Welcome. Also, Simon O'Connell, CEO of SNV Netherlands Development Organization, and Jahan Zeb Chowdhury. I'm not sure I am pronouncing your name anywhere the way it should be. So welcome. And Jahan, is it Jahan? Jahan.
Yes.
Jahan is the climate environmental lead at IFAD. So welcome. Welcome. Please have a seat. Why don't you sit here so that I can see everybody as I ask? I'm just going to be a bit afar. Otherwise, we'll get some noise and static from the microphone. So this is going to be a good conversation. And how about I start my questions to Maya, if you don't mind, Maya. So what does nature positive agricultural transitions look like at the very farm level, in Latin America? And how can climate adaptation finance and climate justice ensure that smallholder farmers are supported in adopting practices that both restore ecosystems and build climate resilience?
Okay, good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to be in this panel, and welcome, hello to everyone. I want to start with a very specific example in Latin America on how some of the regenerative practices, and that goes to Hacienda San Jose. Hacienda San Jose is a large family-owned farm in the Orinoco region, in the savannas of the Orinoco region of the Colombia. And it's 180,000 hectares, big land area. And they have implemented, this land area was completely degraded. There was degraded pastures. Hacienda San Jose implemented and adopted Brachiaria humidicola, the hybrid grass, which was developed by the Alliance of Bioversity International, CIAT, and the CGIAR, and replaced the degraded pastures and regenerated the large quantities of large areas of the farm there, and which has shown to be having restored the soil quality, captured lots of carbon in the water, in the soil, and also regulated water cycles. Where the finance come in? Recently, a couple of years ago, Hacienda San Jose secured a $7 million investment from Anne Green, which is a Dutch financial institution. And it's a concession loan that they received in return to the environmental and the social safeguards they have implemented. So this is a very, very clear example of how implementation at the farm level, and really, what's the purpose of the loan? The loan is to really extend the practices, the good agronomic and at the same time regenerative practices, extending that to 180,000 hectares. In that 180,000 hectares, almost 27 hectares are kept as natural forest, and as a, so there's a lot of, biodiversity conservation efforts are integrated into the efforts of the Hacienda San Jose. What's the role of science and innovation here? We as a CGIAR and the CIAT provides a lot of MRV support to them, and understanding, in addition to improved pasture varieties, providing how much carbon is captured on the land and the soil, and providing a very credible science-based monitoring, verification, and reporting requirements, which are essential for the Hacienda San Jose to secure that loan, and also to report back to the investors who are really looking into, rate of return of investment into nature and climate. So this is just one very specific example I can offer. And from a bigger picture, and investing in biodiversity is also a climate strategy or finance strategy. It's improving NBSAPs, the implementation of the biodiversity strategies of different countries have at the moment. So climate strategy is also a finance strategy, because investors are increasingly looking to see how all of these three dimensions really come together. So it's not just so, and more importantly, every context is variable. The Latin America context is highly different from a context in Africa or in Asia. So context specificity is going to be super critical here. And also with the deep involvement of the person or the stakeholders involved on the ground in designing this mechanism, because the Hacienda San Jose example may not work very well in a different context. But this was really built together with the innovation, science, providing support, and a willing stakeholder who want to really do the innovation in their farms, and also finance coming together to make all of these puzzles of the, the coming together to really make it work.
Maya, thank you very much. I do have a follow-up questions, but it's going to be in the second round of questions that I have for everybody. So thanks for sharing. I mean, every time that I go to a COP, and all of us go to a COP, we have these global meetings. We talk lots about ideas and frameworks and this and that. But ultimately, if all these ideas do not land on the ground and support those who actually produce food, right, we would be wasting our time with talks. So thank you so much for sharing how your organization is working to change things for the lives of farmers who produce food that we all enjoy. Thank you very, very much. The next questions goes to Simon. Simon, welcome. SNV, as we saw in the video, is partnering with WWF, Climate Fund Managers, and the FMO to implement the Dutch Fund for Climate and Development. We call it the DFCD. And what I think would be very important, although this was partly shown in the video, but tell us firsthand how the DFCD operates in practice, and what lessons has emerged from its implementation so far. Over to you, Simon.
Thank you, João, very much. And thank you for the kind words about SNV. We feel likewise about WWF and many of the other partners here in the room and online. And thank you to our hosts. I promise I'm going to answer your question, but I'm going to go slightly non-linearly. I'd like to really say, within the context of the DFCD, Dutch Fund for Climate and Development, blended financing, concessional financing, we're very proud, we're very grateful, but we also have some frustrations and we have some concerns. So on the first bit, on the sort of pride and the gratitude, was kick-started by the Dutch government, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, inclusive green growth, seed funding of about 180 million euros. That then catalyzed further financing from the European Union through something called the EFSD Plus, European Fund for Sustainable Development Plus. And the fund is now not that far off being €500 million. We're very grateful. That's taxpayers' money, and we take that very, very seriously. We're proud. Some of the impacts you heard about in that video at the start was an interesting horticulture. 40% of horticultural produce, as we saw there in Tanzania, doesn't make it to market. That's that East African foods company we've mobilized investments into. We've done likewise with various other companies in East Africa. We've mobilized financing for FMO, blended financing into solar irrigation in Cambodia. And we work with a company called Camimex in Vietnam to mobilize FMO investment to enable something like 17,500 hectares of very precious mangrove ecosystem to be preserved or restored, and somewhere upwards of 5,000 smallholder tiger shrimp farmers to have access to European markets through certified organic. And if you sort of think about that, are there other ways that you can intervene to generate those impacts? Well, yes, there are, but that blended finance is a really powerful and we hope a very sustainable way of going about things. FMO, through their investment, have capitalized further investment from Proparco, the French DFI, also into Camimex. So we're very proud of that. Where we're frustrated is we at SNV, we work with a whole host of results-based financing mechanisms, challenge funds, catalytic grant financing at a smaller ticket size level to try to get a mobilization of further forms of financing. And as one of my wonderful colleagues, Vandana, was saying online, it's that missing middle. It's that lack of a mechanism for us to enable smaller ticket sizes of non-grant, catalytic, blended finance to come in. There isn't an easy enough mechanism for us to make available all those small and medium enterprises or private sector partners that we're working with who need to get beyond the grant money to take the investment money. Lastly, where am I concerned? The concern comes in because official development assistance financing, as we all know, is being hugely squeezed at the moment. Yes, many of us would say there have been too much grant financing, which hasn't been truly catalytic enough. But we see in models such as the Dutch Fund for Climate Development, if you don't provide that initial grant money for deal origination, if you don't provide enough continuity of grant money for your technical assistance provisioning, you won't get that all-important graduation. And if you don't get graduation, you don't get sustainability. So yes, be more strategic with the grant money. Yes, be more targeted. Yes, be clearer around where it needs to be more catalytic, but don't squeeze it further than it's already being squeezed. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Simon, including for sharing frustrations, because we can learn together and hopefully find a solution. But your message is well heard. So let's continue talking about frustration or challenges. I'll go to Elise now. France, I mean, we're here in Brazil, you know, it's a huge country, and France is 15 times smaller than Brazil. I'm Brazilian and I'm not bragging, okay? So I'm sticking to the fact. But Elise, what are the challenges that you experience in France? Could you share with us, please?
Yes, thank you very much. In fact, whatever the country is and how huge it is, an important way to support customers and to support transition is to know where you are and to know your customers and to know, well,
farmers. And in France, even if it's a small country, there is no shortage of challenges. The first one is the fact that farms and agri sector is very complex and heterogeneous. That is to say, there is no one fit all solution. And solutions need to be found at farm level, because at each farm you have a different type of products, different production systems, you have different commodities, you have different soil. So it means that considering the characteristics of soil and the climate issues that you are facing, you are not going to respond the same way. And this is the first challenge that we need to tackle, because if you don't know that, you will not be able to support your customers correctly. Second one is the fact that in France, we have a strong agri ecosystem. It's like a small world, and you have cooperations, you have federations, you have trade unions, you have local authorities, and so on. And if you do not understand how it works, you have no chance to accompany, and you have no chance to support it the correct way, because you are not going to be heard. You are going to be like, okay, you don't know my word, you don't know my job, you don't know what I'm doing. So if we want to be relevant in our actions, we really need to know how it operates, and we need to operate in close coordination with the French agricultural professions that are even in charge of writing their own decarbonization pathways. And that has been set by the French government. So the French government said to the French interprofessions, okay, you need to write down your decarbonization pathways. And then we, as a bank, and we are the bank of more than 8 out of 10 French farmers, we need to be very close to what they are going to say to be able to support them. And maybe a last challenge is the fact that there will be no agri-transition if we do not take into account the fact that we need to strengthen food sovereignty in France, and the fact that we need to make sure that farmers and farms are resilient enough to be able to develop adaptation strategies.
Very good. You mentioned something, Elise, that I love, and we work with that at WWF, because again, we can talk all we want about global issues and global solutions, but in fact, the first thing you mentioned is that there's no silver bullet. There's no one size fits all solution. Context is super important, whether it's for a big country, a small country, solutions need to be contextualized. And if we don't pay attention to the context in which the food system is operating, we can have no hope for a transition, right? So thanks for bringing that up. Let me transition now to Jahan from IFAD. Jahan, what locally led models has IFAD found most effective in getting adaptation finance directly to smallholder farmers, and how can governments and investors ensure this money reaches the ground instead of getting stuck in intermediaries? Over to you.
Do you want to hear about my frustration first?
Go for it.
Nah, I'm going to save it for later. Okay, so 3 different ways. The first one is absolutely it's important for us to aggregate. There's no way we can reach to 500 million smallholder farms, more than 2 billion people. It's very difficult for us, whether you're talking about decision-making process, funding flow, reporting mechanism, to reach to every single smallholder farmers. So therefore, the first message is, let's think about aggregating. So think about farmers association, credit unions. We have a platform called public-private producer partnership. So by bringing all these farmers together, you're actually aggregating them and giving the scale and volume that the commercial banks, microfinance institutions need and want. So that's aggregation. The second is about de-risking. You can aggregate and you can encourage the public development banks, the commercial banks, the MFIs to come in, but unless we de-risk their investment, it is going to be very difficult for this money to reach the small-scale farmers for obvious reasons. Nobody wants to make a loss. Yeah, whether you're talking about the small-scale farmers or you're talking about the commercial entities. So one example that we have in Sahel region, very risky, very fragile. We started a new program called iGriffin. It's essentially greening the financial system, whereby we are channeling the resources from our side combined with GCF money. So this is about a blended arrangement, channeling this through the public development banks. The question is, for what? The answer is for adaptation financing. So we are providing interest rate at 0%. So the public development can increase the tenure, reduce the overall interest rate for the final borrowers. Yeah. And that 0% interest rate from our side is essentially also helping them to de-risk their investment. But loan financing itself is not sufficient. If you want to take something new, if you want to innovate, it's very important for us to also mobilize grant financing, blend it with the loan, and then deploy. But what are we going to use that grant financing for? That is for innovation. These public development banks, in some cases, do not have the adaptation products that they can deploy to the small-scale farmers. And that's where the grant mechanism comes in. What are the types of products that can be deployed by the public development banks? And that's where we need to provide that technical assistance, and the technical assistance has to come from the grant financing. So it's about blending from different sources, but it's also about blending of different financing mechanisms. So that's a second message. It's about de-risking. But the third message is about you can de-risk, you can aggregate, but you will never get the volume and scale unless you are reforming the policies. We have heard about food system, right? Food system, if you think about as a concept, how many ministries are involved? You have Ministry of Energy in charge of electrification. You have Ministry of Water in charge of increasing the supply of water. You have Ministry of Agriculture who wants to increase the overall productivity. And importantly, you have Finance Ministry who has to look for various different sources of growth so they can generate the revenue for stabilizing the fiscal situation. So many different ministries are involved with competing mandates that you don't necessarily see food system reflected in the NDCs sufficiently enough. And forget about the national development plans. They're not necessarily reflected there. And if these are not reflected in the national development plans, you will not see them in the budgetary system of the government. So in order for us to ensure that this is being properly reflected, we need to take this food system from a concept to actually integrate them in the NDCs and the National Development Plan. So this is about that policy dimension, the policy push that we need in order for us to scale the volume. My last message is, it's also important to think about the change in narrative. You know, when we think about smallholder farmers, we're always thinking about the financing gaps. We're always thinking about the needs. But is it possible for us to think about, hey, this is not about 350 billion financing gaps that we have on a yearly basis, but it is actually a $10 trillion business opportunity. And that narrative can also make a shift in terms of how the private sector is addressing this. So I would say those are the key mechanisms for us to reach to the small scale farmers through that financing dimension, but importantly, through the policy dimension. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Johan. I mean, there was no frustration in there, only solutions and hope.
I'm just saving it for my for the back.
For the yeah. Very good, very good. Or the second round of questions. No, joking. Thanks for sharing your insights. Let me go back to Maya for a follow-up question from her first remarks. Maya, what are the most promising innovative financing models that can unlock investment in regenerative or nature positive agriculture? And what barriers still prevent these mechanisms from reaching smallholder farmers at scale, especially in fragile contexts?
I'm going to start from the second part of the question, and very much aligned with what Johan was mentioning from a science and research perspective. And there is also a problem and challenge of aggregation. Because when you look at data and when you look at, if you want to de-risk and you look at data, it's all over the place, you know, depending upon you look at the rice or a corn, or you're looking at livestock systems, or you're looking at vegetables. If you look at de-risk and look for data in terms of what really works and what doesn't work, and the data is really dispersed. So we do have to do a better job about really aggregating that effectively, which speaks to certain key metrics that investors will look at it, and those metrics will differ quite significantly depending upon which investor you're talking about. But there are lots of disparate data sitting all over the place, and we do need to do a job of effectively bringing those together from a science perspective, which will then enable effectively the investments that need to come in. On the de-risking perspective, we've been working very much on that aspect and working with some of the banks, and we've developed an impact SF analyzer, which effectively look at what's the rate of return of investment of specific opportunities that we're looking into it. And what that has done, the analyzer has done, is to really bring at environmental, satellite data and other disparate data in terms of soil quality and available data that we have to bring together with the help of AI to really understand what's the rate of return of investment in that. And also there are a lot of pilot studies and really understanding why certain pilots are successful, is some of the pilots are ready to be scaled, because not all pilots are ready to be scaled. And there are some key parameters one need to look into it saying that. So there is an aspect of going to de-risk. Impact SF analyzer is helping that. We've been working with several, entrepreneurs and agribusinesses and some of the banks in facilitating, enabling, using the data for the capital to flow in. Several barriers. The first, the number you have put in, subsidies. That's an easy one for government to look into it. And if at least a part of the subsidy could be repurposed, there needs to be a broader alignment with different ministries. But in addition to that, there's one easy fix, at least a part of that subsidy is repurposed into climate finance and supporting biodiversity and restoration. That will be a significant win already that we will be making in the scene here.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Maya. Simon, next one for you is, how can a more systemic investment approach, particularly through blended finance instruments across the capital continuum, would help shift the financial sector's perception of risk, especially among smallholders in agricultural value chains?
Yeah, great. Thank you. I'm going to, Jahan, if you don't mind, I'm going to build on what you were saying. So yes, aggregation, of course, we absolutely need that, but ultimately aggregation still means somewhere within those who are being aggregated, there's a smaller ticket size somewhere in the pile or in the puzzle. So I think the sort of systemic, I'll give you two things, systemic changes that we need. One, we have to figure out a mechanism where all that grant money that so many NGOs or development agencies are mobilizing to work in partnership with private sector, particularly SMEs, that has to be priced in better. At the moment, so often on the back of the grant money, well, the model has often been one grant to another grant to another grant from another organization. The sort of grant-trepreneur side of things hasn't been catalytic enough. But there hasn't been a good enough way to say, well, if SMV, we worked, another example, with the Dutch government and Rabobank, with about 87 SMEs in 3 countries in East Africa to enable climate smart tools and technologies to reach more peripheral parts of those 3 countries. There isn't a mechanism for investors to easily pick up on the back of that, pick up on the technical assistance provisioning that's been done, pick up on the back of the due diligence or the de-risking and come in at a better investment price point. So that's one thing. The second thing is, and there's this phrase that really struck me, I came across it the other day, Jacques Delors, one of the visionaries of the European Union, yeah? He said we need competition that stimulates, cooperation that strengthens, and collaboration that enables solidarity, yeah? Solidarity. At the moment, the danger is we're moving so far and so deep and so quickly to the first, including with some of the DFIs competing with one another, yeah? So let's be clear, where we want innovations to come in, where we want to stimulate the competition, Let's then on the collaboration side, let's figure out how we collaborate better between the grant money and the investment money to bring that kind of aggregation more into practice. And then let's not lose sight of the need for solidarity, where that grant money, you know what, in El Fasher in Western Darfur at the moment, it's not going to be very catalytic. In Gaza at the moment, that grant money, it's not going to be very catalytic, but we still need the grant money. So I know I'm diverting a bit, but unjumbling all of that so we're clear around those three parts and where the monies can best be mobilized. That's the sort of systemic change that we need.
Excellent. What are the 3 C's again? Competition, collaboration, I'm missing one.
Solidarity.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
2 C's and 1
Yeah,
A.
yeah,
All
yeah.
right.
Yeah.
No, very good. Thanks a lot. Great framing. Thanks so much. Elise, I'm going to go to you now. How does Crédit Agricole support the agri-sector in seizing opportunities?
I would say that the potential is at the corner between food security and just transition. Food security, meaning that it's going to be enough and it's going to be healthy. And just transition is the fact that this transition and the transition also with adaptation has to operate with protection of biodiversity and the protection of farmers. And they can also have they know that they can have decent revenue, and currently it's not really the case. If I put apart big farms and the large farms, as you shown before, who receive the most subsidies, and as Nicolas also said earlier, if I talk about just the regular farms, in 10 years in the EU, we lost 3 million on farmers. 3 million among 10. And the average age of the population is 55. So we are facing a critical point here where we are going to lack of renewing generations. And if we do not act with a potential for this profession, with joyful future, we are not going to help the farms and the agri-sector in the EU. So what we try to do within Crédit Agricole is the fact that we try to operate so very closely what the interprofession said by facilitating technical measures like improving management of cattle herd practices, like the management of livestock effluents, including biogas production, like covering crops, and so on and so on. And we also developed a tool that is provided to our advisors, so banking advisors who are speaking with our clients and the farmer clients. And this tool is aiming at first awareness, because some of them is just not in their top priority, and most of them adaptation, they see what it is because they are the climate crisis, they are facing it, so they know that it's a topic for them, but sometimes they're not very aware of what all is inside. And so this tool is supporting the awareness of agricultures, and it's also providing supports in a sense that how can you best practice your commodities and your culture within the knowledge of your soil type, within the knowledge of what's going on with the climate around your area, and so on. And it's providing supports like banking products, bonding services, to help them through this pathway.
Thanks, Elise. I was impressed with the numbers that you just shared in terms of fewer farming households and older farming households, right? And that was striking. I didn't realize the number. I knew that there was a fact, but thanks for sharing the numbers.
Yeah, and maybe a point as well to be shown is the fact that the farmers, it's really like a family business, and the youngs see their parents just struggling with living, so they see that they do not want such a life, so they go apart sometimes. And when they still do this job, it's really difficult for them because if they move apart from what they have been told and what they have been inherited, it's like I'm going to push backwards what I've been told by my parents. So it's sometimes also difficult for them to say, okay, I'm going to do something else because that means what my parents did before was not the right thing to do.
Thanks. And this is in France, a developed country. Let's talk about in fragile contexts where IFAD works the most. So Jahan, from IFAD's experience with de-risking and blended finance, which instruments you think work best in fragile contexts, and what policy or market signals are still needed to scale them?
I'm not quite sure if I can say this is the best instrument. There are multiple instruments, and depending on the context, the applicability and the usage would vary, of course. I want to give you example of two different instruments, and I want to start with the first instrument that focuses on insurance. Now, insurance is super important, particularly in fragile contexts. I wouldn't say that it's only in fragile context. In any context, insurance is very important. The failure of the insurance industry essentially means the failure of the entire financial system. An insurance industry is going to fail if you're not taking climate into consideration. So, my example, we have a project that is ongoing in 7 Sahel countries. And here we have come up with 3-stage approach. The first one is, before you deploy the insurance instrument, it's important for us to see how you can better predict the risk. So here you have the forecasting system, the weather forecast I'm talking about, that is incredibly helpful for the small scale farmers. So it's about predictability. Yeah, it's about how you know when the risk will occur and what you can do if this actually takes place. The second one is, let's say that the risk actually occurred. There are ways on how you can reduce the impact of that risk. So climate resilient seeds distribution. This can help you to reduce that risk. So that's kind of a second stage approach. The third, in spite of doing all of these, there will always be residual risk, the risk that you need to transfer. And that's where the insurance comes in, where we can pool various different risks, multi-hazard risk, and you can then transfer this to the insurance industry. So it's a kind of a 3-pronged approach that we have followed. It's a combination of financing sources coming from IFAD, but also, like the previous example, GCF is playing a big role. And if you think about the composition of approximately $143 million that is being invested, majority of this is actually coming from grant. And grant is, again, very important in such critical situation where the fragility is high, where the risk is very, very high. So that's one example. The other example that I want to give you, this is not in a fragile context. It's in East Africa, where we have created a first loss facility. And in fact, it's a stacked financing system. In the first layer, you have the first loss. And this is where the grant is being deployed, coming from, again, GCF, talking about cooperation, but also from a few other European partners who are providing grant. Then you have your subordinated loan. That's where IFAD and GCF is also coming in. And then finally, you have the senior tranche. If you think about the financial composition, from the public sources, we are giving $90 million US. That's 90 million within stack 1 and 2. If you think about the last stack, it's 90 million additional that we have mobilized from Equity Bank, commercial bank. A commercial bank getting involved in providing financing for adaptation, for small-scale farmers. Why do you think that they're doing it? They're doing it because of the first loss facility. Yeah, that incentivizes them to ensure that they can create a new business opportunity when it comes to adaptation finance. And how can the public financing influence this process? we are influencing this process of a commercial bank when it comes to their ESG requirements by coming up with taxonomy when it comes to adaptation finance. Taxonomy. So this is going to actually influence their loan screening process. But at the same time, we are helping them to come up with better quality adaptation products that they can provide to MFIs, to the farmers associations, and eventually that would go to the small scale farmers. And that innovation is taking place because of that risk first loss facility that we have deployed. So these are some of the examples of the instruments. But the government has a big role to play. The government also needs to ensure that the policy dimension is consistent across the board. You know, we talked about NBSAP, we talked about NDCs here all the time. We also talk about NAPs. These are three different strategies. I used to work for finance ministry. So talking about frustration, if you're asking me and saying, hey, now you have to mainstream these three different strategies in your national development plans and your budgeting process, I would have been very, very upset back in 2009. It's just impossible. The opportunity cost of what you're asking me to do and the complexity when it comes to the whole of government approach is just too high. It's just not practical. So I think it's very important for us to demonstrate the co-benefits. What are the co-benefits between climate, biodiversity, and environment in general? And also, let's not think about adaptation in silo. Adaptation has mitigation benefits. And let's make sure those mitigation benefits are spelled out much more clearly than what we had been doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Jahan. Now, as the final segment here, it's a call to action, that famous moment in which each one of you will share that one call to action that you would have to help unlock transformation in the agricultural sector. So what would be your one sentence, one call to action? Let's start with you, Elise.
I would say that if we want to have an agri-transition and adaptation on agriculture, awareness and action must take place at each level of the value chain. So farmers, obviously, because they are at the heart of a process. Banks, as us, because we can help them with their financial journey, but also the governments and regulators, because they are the ones who can create the conditions for fair, resilient, and sustainable models where the supply meets the demand. The academics, because they can help on research, they can help on new technologies. Also the agri-food companies, because they can pay a fair price to raw materials and they can operate to move towards different technology, different types of products. I'm thinking about ultra food processing. I'm thinking about ultra transformation, ultra packaging, and maybe they can operate on local distribution network. And finally, with consumers to move forward towards healthier eating habits.
Awesome. Awareness and action in each node of the value chain. Thanks. Jahan, go ahead.
Just one sentence.
Just one sentence. It can be a long one, as you've seen.
Let's make sure that taking care of small scale farmers can demonstrate how important they are for growth, for stability, and for shared prosperity.
Thank you so much. After all, they are responsible between 50 and 80% of everything we put on our plates. So all the power to small farmers. Thanks, Jahan.
Smallholders really need collateral to get any investment. And I think, and I really hope that the investors and the banks are here in the long run, not in a short-term benefits, because regeneration takes time. It's not from 1 year, it's not very linear. So let's hope sure that, you know, this is a trust building process, reducing the risk and investment opportunities for smallholders.
De-risking. Thank you so much, Maya. Simon, go ahead.
So I would say be much more intentional around partnerships and the deployment of grant financing towards that impact capital continuum.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Look, do we finish at 3 or 3:15? Because if it's 3:15, we have time for questions or not? You tell me. 5 minutes. Oh, we do have time for questions. So who among of you has the smartest question to ask? The smartest, because it will be like 1 or 2 questions to any of the panel members or to all 4. Over to you, the smartest. Oh, come on. All right. Okay, there you go. That's brave. Here, use my mic.
I'm not sure if this is going to be the smartest question, but I really liked what you said about how smallholder farmers really have to focus on balancing resilience and crop insurance. And I guess, at least I come from the US, and those are 2 financial tools that are very separate and often come from like even different agencies. So I was just curious about like how we can ensure either through policy or through some other mechanism that farmers are focusing and balancing crop insurance and resilience and not just depending on one or the other.
That was very smart. That was the smartest question. Who has the smartest answer now? All the 4 of you can answer this. Their time to be embarrassed.
By no means I'm claiming that I have the smartest answer. We all respond to incentives. Yeah, it's very important for us to ensure that there are incentives mechanism that can be placed by the government. So that's one. Think about incentives. Think about not only avoiding cost, but if you have insurance, what it means in terms of ensuring that you still can continue accessing the market, your income can remain stable, you can diversify your income. And third is, sometimes the behavior change can also come from the organizations that are offering you these services. So on one hand, if you're taking, let's say, a loan for X, is it possible to combine that loan with an insurance product that would not only help the small scale farmers, but insurance company and the microfinance institute that are offering these products? So that's where collaboration also needs to happen. So essentially what we are suggesting is, it's possible for us to swim in the same lane, at the same rhythm, with the same pace, but the government has, the US government in this case, has got a huge role to play.
Yeah, I mean, I'd just maybe give a slightly different response, hopefully to a roughly similar question, in that we haven't talked that much around kind of digital and data. I think of some of the work we SMB are doing in the Sahel with the Netherlands Space Office and mobile network operators. Some of that has enabled, still fairly small scale, largely women's groups to save online, to get into some sort of online retail commerce activities. And all of that digital wallet data brings down the cost of borrowing. It enables a greater credit worthiness to be more available. And that goes some way towards then enabling the right sort of insurance products to be available in a, highly, highly fragile context.
All right. Thank you for sharing your wisdom, both in questions and in answers, and sharing your insights onto something that is extremely important, which is climate justice and climate finance. And why not nature justice and nature finance as well? Because climate and nature go together, right? The climate agenda and biodiversity agenda walk hand in hand. So thank you very much to the 4 panelists and the 5 speakers, and to Nicolas as well. And a big round of applause, and thank you. Thank you for joining.